Hi, everyone. Welcome to our legacy author interview with the three authors of Leading Through Technology, Three Leaders Share How Arizona TEA has positively impacted their careers. Lindsey, Erica, and Nan, welcome.
Thank you.
Hey,
Morning.
So the article was a great retelling of the history of AzTEA, but also, not coincidentally, your careers working as education technology professionals and working with the organization over the years. I remember back in the 80s and 90s moving from the classroom into ed tech. We were kind of the people that were geeky enough to go get the training, and because we were brave enough to come back and train everybody else, we became the ed tech experts. And yet it was a challenge because whether you're talking about your building principal or district leaders, everyone you were the tech guy. Go back in the network closet, do your thing, right? No one was thinking about leadership when they were thinking about, they just wanted to make sure everything worked. And a good day was when you didn't have fires to put out and you could actually focus on supporting teachers and making learning happen. When you think back to those times, and as we sit here today, how has that changed when you think about leadership as ed tech leaders? And certainly AzTEA is a great vehicle for giving you opportunities to lead and then bring it into your day job. But beyond that, how has leadership changed? How are you treated differently now as an ed tech leader than we probably were 30 years ago?
That is an interesting question because I feel like you were spot on. People, because I knew a little bit about Outlook, people would come to me and ask me Outlook questions, and I'd say, I'm not sure, but I'll find out. So I would go and spend time figuring it out, and then I come back and show them. And I had one lady say, "How come you know so much about Outlook?" I said, "Because people ask me questions, and then I go figure out how to do it."
Yeah.
I think I think it's similar nowadays when people are, talk about AI.
Yeah.
Well, how should we use AI? Well, I'm researching and trying to figure out what is the best way to use AI. What are the best frameworks? What are the best tools? And then come back and create something that I can share with others.
That's a perfect example going from 30 years ago until now. Lindsey and Erica, what are your thoughts on leadership and all of this?
I mean, I can't go back 30 years, but
Okay, fair
I
enough.
can go back about 15.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I think, like Nan's point, it those types of positions are very unique in that you really have to take initiative. Sometimes you're totally left alone, and that can be a good thing and a curse. Um, but you have to take initiative and advocate for yourself, and be the one that steps up and says, "Hey, I'm the bridge between IT and the curriculum. I need a seat at this table because these decisions affect our teachers in so many ways and our students in so many ways." But it's also, as Nan said, the initiative, like we don't know every platform and everything. It would be impossible to keep up. So it's really the people holding positions like this in ed tech are the ones that are like, yes, I'm going to take my time and go play around and go learn. And a lot of just independent learning. And I think, I would hope that that does transfer to other types of leadership roles, even outside of ed tech. We want our teachers to continue learning and growing professionally. And we would like our principals to do that and our superintendents. But I think ed tech is a little more unique because the technology changes so quickly. You're not growing in your understanding of pedagogy, which can happen over a longer time. It's, oh, this came out this week and, or this feature got added to a platform we already have, and I have to train everybody on it in a week. So there's a rapid pace to it.
Very true.
Well, Lindsey took
Eric?
my answer.
Ah.
But essentially what kind of made, I remember thinking back to when I was an ed tech specialist 10 years ago, and we were at the time a team of 7 people, and we were a team of 7 people because we had one of us at each of our schools. And so it was a very non-hierarchical team, but they're kind of developed kind of the natural leaders and the natural followers of that group. And the natural leaders were the ones that said, well, I'm either going to figure out, I'll be the one to figure out what this new feature is and how it works. And then I'll tell everybody next week when we meet what it's about. Or the ones that said, hey, I have this really cool idea, pedagogically, whatever it is, and I want to go figure out with the tech and with the resources that we have, how we can make this happen. And so the leadership, of course, and again, like Lindsey said, I don't think that this idea is unique to the ed tech space or the education space, but it's certainly done in a different way because of the way not only does technology develop, the way that technology makes its way into education and, you know, the speed at which it does that. But the leaders come down to the people who take the initiative to find the new answers rather than, and not to throw too much shade at the stand and deliver lecturers who seek to do something different after they've been teaching or learning for 10 years and find a new and better way to do it, and not just kind of be like, well, this is how I did it for 10 years. This is what I'm going to do. You don't get to do that in tech very effectively.
Well, and I would say that the ed tech folks, I think, are very flexible in their thinking and in their movement. They always have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. So, okay, if this doesn't work, then I already know that I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. I think that they can weave in and out of situations a little bit easier and take things more in stride. I think that we've learned that it's not going to work all the time, and that's okay. And you got to be vulnerable and say, okay, it's not going to work every time, but this part I practice and I'm pretty sure confident it's going to work. But if it doesn't, then this is what I'm going to do instead.
Well, I think the flexibility also moves into like your strengths as a leader. So we typically talk about like the visionaries and then the systems thinkers, right? But as an ed tech person, like you have to see the big picture and you have to look at the systems and you have to look granular and you have to focus on the individual. I mean, you have to be able to fluidly move between all of those spaces and approaches.
And you also have to be, especially when you're in ed tech, and this not necessarily the network guy in the IT department, right? You have to be able to do both. You cannot forget the pedagogy for the sake of the tech, because like Nan said, it's not going to work the first time. And so everything that you do, everything that you teach, when you go and teach teachers, when you go and coach teachers, when you go and do all these things, everything still has to be rooted in pedagogy, because when it doesn't work, how do you fall back on, okay, how can we teach this concept now that this doesn't work? What's the paper and pencil backup of what we're doing, and not forgetting how important that is and keeping the pedagogy at the center of it. And it's kind of a tried and true cliche at this point, but like, the leaders are also the people who are not using tech for tech's sake, which almost feels counterintuitive, rather than just using it to solve a problem or do the latest thing. Leadership is about doing it with intention as well.
It's also true. Everything you're saying is like hitting the nail on the head. And the one thing that keeps coming back in my mind as I hear you talking is risk taking. With technology, you have to say, okay, we're just going to get in there and learn, and we're going to make mistakes, and that'll help us learn better. And there are going to be days we just go home and we just need to decompress because it wasn't the best day. But we're going to come back again because something about risk taking and leadership is inherent with ed tech. Am I just stating the obvious, or is there something more there?
Oh, and I think like we often talk about, like when you're thinking of just professional development with educators and not even tech specific, and we say, hey, we really need to do a better job of practicing what we preach, right? We want our teachers to differentiate for our students. We need to differentiate our PD for our teachers. Whether we always do that or is not across the board all the time, but I think similarly, that risk taking, that's what we want our students to do. So if we're not willing to do it as adults,
Yes,
we're not practicing what we expect of them.
Well, and when you think about, if you bring it back to being like on the AzTEA board, I think for a lot of people, it's about them stepping out of their comfort zone in their own little school or their own little classroom and working on a greater, bigger team to do things for the state. And I've always wanted to do a research study on following the pathways of people that are on the board and where they end up, because I feel like we grow leaders because we help them have skills that transfer across into their own jobs and help them to do things that they hadn't done before in their own little classroom.
I
It's
agree.
really true. I'm sorry, Erica.
Oh no. It's made me be a lot more intentional. I've always been an introverted person, until I stand up in front of a room of students and then everything is fine. I don't know how this works. I haven't figured it out yet. But 10 years ago, a friend asked me, "Hey, I think you should be on the board with AzTEA with me." And I said, "Okay, tell me about that." And I did, and the confidence that I've gotten in not only just myself, the way I interact with each other, I think I'm a little less introverted, all of that. But I think it's a great experience for board members, but also members in general to say, you get out of kind of, we kind of use the term when we talk as a group about, districts being in a silo.
Mhm.
And it really puts you in a position where you go and you talk to somebody from another school who does something different. And you really have to be able to articulate, this is why we do this, and not because this is what we've always done. That stops being an acceptable answer
Yeah.
when you talk with people who don't have the institutional knowledge of the same institution that you have, and you start to go, well, why do we do these things this way? Why do we approach these things this way? Is there a better way for XYZ reason? And so I think the value, and I think I think this is true of professional organizations for ed tech, but also for content areas and things like that,
Sure.
is being able to talk to somebody informally that you may
Mhm.
never have met before in a confident way, to be able to, I've never sat down and thought about my elevator pitch, right? But
Right.
I could naturally do it now
Yeah.
the way that I couldn't 10 years ago. And it's being part of this organization and being on the board in AzTEA and being a leader that has inherently kind of honed that skill that I think is kind of resting dormant in every teacher. But when you're forced to use it, it's like a muscle and it actually gets a lot stronger.
Erica, tell what your new thing you learned to jump into for this year. What role are you playing in AzTEA this year?
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, that's actually the perfect example. I completely forgot all about this. I've been on the board for almost 10 years now, and I have sworn up and down for the last 9 years that I wanted nothing to do with the treasurer position. It's the money position.
Right.
I just don't, I was good at math in high school, but I got to calculus in 11th grade and was like, I don't need this to be a historian or history teacher.
Right.
I'm gonna see myself out.
Yeah.
And so I always said up and down, I said, you know what? Treasurer is just not gonna be the way that I step up and join the executive board. And then this year we sat at our board retreat, and we someone nominated a treasurer and they didn't accept the nomination. And I went, okay, I'll do it. And we were in the meeting and Nan looked at me and from across the room and she said, are you sure? Because you've said in the past, this is the opposite of what you want. This is why people don't nominate you for this. And I
Yeah.
said, you know what? It does scare me, but I've seen particularly the two treasurers who came before me. Lindsey was one of them, by the way,
Yeah.
who in the nicest way possible, I can say, never struck me as math people, and they handled it beautifully. So they've given me the confidence to say that I can handle it. I can do it. And if I can't, I now have the two previous treasurers that I know I can lean on. And the reason that the person who was nominated didn't accept the nomination was basically for the same reason. And I looked at her, and she's a new board member just this year. And I looked at her and I said, all right, I'm doing this so that in 5 years, hopefully not the full 10 it took me, but in 5 years, you will feel comfortable accepting this nomination too.
It's so much about
Not a math
technology.
person. Secretary all day.
There's so much about ed tech life that is disruption, that is having to say, okay, I need to think about this differently because I may have sworn this off for 10 years, but here it is, and now I'm going to dive in. So, and I don't think there's any better current dynamic in play than AI, because even if we were great proponents of everything, starting with Apple IIe and 2GS Plus, and um, this is a game changer. This is no longer what we're comfortable with. This is now a brave new world that even the greatest early adopters are struggling with in terms of, well, what will this look like? And how will the human factor still, come into play? And how do we marry all this together so that we embrace its power, but we also don't lose the humanity in the process? When you look at that as AzTEA, are you having discussions on the board trying to figure that out? Do you already have answers? You're just hiding under a bushel and waiting to show us all? Where are you at, since you are the thinkers and the doers and the visionaries for this?
Well, it's funny you should ask that question because we are part of the Arizona AI Alliance, and
Yes.
we've teamed together with them to make sure that the districts adopt and use technology ethically and responsibly, especially particularly in AI.
Yeah.
And I was going through yesterday and looking at the sessions we've done over the last year and a half, and we've created 13 different sessions to help support educators in their journey in AI,
Nice.
from helping to highlight the guidance that Arizona has developed to how to prompt, how to use it with the littles, how to look at what the future is going to look like with AI. So we've kind of dipped our toes in different sectors and more of the practitioner, how to do it from their lens, not necessarily from the policymaker side.
Is a lot of it the mindset as opposed to the practical implementation?
A lot, yeah, you go.
I think it's tremendously mindset. And you said we're in a brave new world, and I'm going to say yes and no, because I think one thing that we didn't do well with social media was understand the impact that it has beyond the classroom walls. We said
Right.
that's not an education issue.
Right.
And it has changed the way our children, our students, our adults communicate, relate to one another, what they hold, to be valuable, what they consider as a source of learning. And it's changed our definitions of digital citizenship and media literacy and all of those terms we'd come to know, that I think, 10 years ago seemed a little more cut and dry. And I think AI is the next iteration of that. I think AI, yes, there are unique components to it that are much more unpredictable, but I think we need to look at what we did not do well around
Right.
social media and understand that AI is not uniquely an education issue. It is also not living outside of education. It is
No.
immersed in everything. And there's so many layers to it. And as Nan said, we're part of the Alliance. We're part of a lot of, little networking groups that kind of meet and overlap and have commonalities and who attends those and the conversations that are had. And it's everything from, data privacy to how do we really define AI literacy? We've been, gracious enough to have the opportunities to give some feedback on some of the other different documents and frameworks being developed. And nobody has the right answer. And I don't think there is a right answer because it's continuously evolving. But as long as we're having these conversations, and the focus of those conversations is how do we keep the humanity, how do we keep our social emotional components and focus on the mental health and what this means more broadly for us as
Yes.
humans, I
Yes.
think we're going to be okay, and it's going to be fluid and it's going to be a journey. But it's so complex, but it's also not the first time. Like people,
No.
I spent all day yesterday at an ASU AI day, and President Crow was talking about how people hated the printing press, right? So every technology transforms society, and that's what's happening now.
Yeah, I just think AI is, and I think this is really helping to separate kind of the mark of the good ed tech leader is, and it goes down to the idea of there's not one right answer, and it's being willing to accept that there's not one right answer. Because
Yes.
when we think about things in the past that have involved technology that have asked us ethical questions on some level, like we're talking about COPA and data privacy, sure, those are ethical questions, right? But ultimately, they have an answer. The
Right.
answer is we should protect our kids' data and only use stuff that protects our kids' data. And of course, like Lindsey said, there are data privacy issues with AI and things like that. But when you talk about some of those other kind of more nuanced considerations when it comes down to keeping humanity's thing in things,
Yes.
the
AI companions.
yeah,
Yes. Yes.
the environmental impact of AI, those kind of more nuanced ethics, it makes it even more difficult to find a correct answer. And being comfortable enough with knowing that there is not a correct answer and never going to find one, and going, well, we have to move through this anyway.
Right.
Because in a way, and it's so funny that I think that Lindsey brought up the social media example because I didn't think about it in that way. But I was, late high school when, Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff came out. And
Right.
yeah, no, I wasn't taught how to use that properly. But those are kinds of things where, like, even 10 years ago, we could say, yeah, okay, kids can't get on MySpace, thinking, more than 10 years ago, kids couldn't get on. I mean, there are still some high schools where kids can't get on YouTube. You can simply kind of not let those URLs through your filters, right?
Right.
As AI is taking over in a way that the tools that we've already said are okay, right? We've already said Microsoft Word is okay. We're already a Google district, whatever it is. Canva, for example, those features are now being put in to our daily lives in a way that we can't just turn off Google, because
No.
now there's an AI component to Google Docs or Canva or whatever. And down the road, a couple of years from now, figure out how that's going to work, because they're now in the pieces that make everything work. And so we're forced to reconcile with these ethical questions and measuring them against the policy in the district, state, institution that we're in, and being comfortable with knowing that tomorrow that could change. And
Yes.
what am I going to do? Not if, but when
When.
the circumstances change.
Right. Well, and if you look at just because we didn't show them how to do it doesn't mean they're not using it. And
Yeah.
I think as leaders, it's our responsibility to help provide some of those guidance and support to help them do it the right way. And I think we've been trying to work with leaders to help them understand, even though your students are K-8 students, they
Yeah.
still need to understand what AI does and where it's at and how it's a part of your life, whether you are using it on a daily, like whether you're using ChatGPT or one of the other ones on a daily basis. The high school students are definitely using it. Some of the K-8s are using it as well. But I think that you can't put your head in the sand any longer.
You really can't. And, to me, it gives me hope that 5 years, 10 years down the road, schooling will be even more collaborative, more generative, more project-based, all these things that we've all talked about for years as things have evolved. For each of you, this is kind of a wonderful way to wrap up the discussion. What are your hopes when this kind of liberates a lot of the institutional and industrial age things that hemmed us in education? What do you think classrooms are going to look like, or schools are going to look like when we have grandchildren 30 years from now going, well, maybe not 30 years, but you know what I'm saying? What are your personal hopes for how this is going to evolve education?
I mean, I think those of us in the ed tech world, we're trying to see a silver lining of the pandemic, that maybe it would kind of push the needle more dramatically
Yes.
around
Yes.
adopting the use of technology
Yep.
in instruction. And personally, I felt like we came out of it and I saw educators who never wanted to see a computer in the classroom again, or ones who wanted to do everything how we did online, whether it was appropriate in person or not.
Yeah.
And so I think there was a little bit of kind of this like, ugh, that didn't have the impact that we were hoping, right?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
hear this when I talk to, like I'm doing my PhD right now and I'm talking to professors who say, wow, your topic, that was my PhD 20 years ago, and we
Wow.
haven't moved things enough. And so now I'm hearing more of a maybe AI is that. And I don't want to be so optimistic that we get disappointed again. You want to be realistic as well, and it's going to take time, but I do think it's pushing, like there isn't a choice but to redefine how you assess students. There isn't a choice but to, focus on how students are interpreting or analyzing what they see digitally. And I think we're going to see a shift towards, like you mentioned, collaboration. I think really promoting student agency, which we've said we wanted to do for years, but
Yes.
in a much more meaningful way where they have to be in control of knowing how to learn. Like, and
Yes.
I've read multiple articles on this recently. It's like learners need to learn how to learn because that is the skill.
Yes.
I
Wonderful.
agree
Thank
with
you.
that completely. It makes me think of when the last 5 years I've worked in a library, the high school library, rather than in the classroom. And the number of students that have come up to me and said, okay, I need to print. Okay, how do I do that? Okay, we're gonna learn how to print. And it kind of takes me back, but then I realized we did that thing. We assumed that all of the kids about 10 years ago, we decided that they all knew what they were doing. They were
Right.
all smarter than us. And
Right.
then we didn't teach any, but we stopped teaching how to use the technology. We presumed they were going to figure it out,
Yeah.
figured it out wrong.
Yeah.
And now and it comes down to perfect full circle moment, kind of Nan was saying in the very beginning. The leaders
Yes.
are the ones who are like, I don't know the answer to that question, but let me figure that out. It's now we have to figure out how to put that back in the students, right?
Yes.
Very basic tech support level. The screen on my convertible laptop got turned around and now it's stuck in portrait mode. What do I do? You know what? That's a new model of computer we have on campus this year. I don't know off the top of my head. Let me go Google it.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go Google it so that you as the student see me model for you. Hey, I don't know everything in my head. It's okay
Right.
to say I don't know. But I'm gonna go figure it out, and I'm actually gonna go ask the Google machine the exact question you just asked me. I'm just gonna type it in the box and see what pops up and see what we can figure out, and we're gonna
Right.
figure this out together in real time.
Love it. Love it.
Well, and I think that with all of these things, we've always wanted to do some sort of personalized learning for students and that differentiation. And
Yes.
I don't think that AI should take over the whole part of learning. Like I still want them. I want kindergartners cutting and pasting.
Yes.
I want them playing with clay and glue
Yes.
and putting stuff together.
Yes.
I want middle school math kids to be taking blocks and tiles and figuring out how to do algebra. Like
Yeah.
I want kids to be touching and doing things as well. But I think we have an opportunity to really let the computer do what it's good at and let it differentiate the curriculum. Like they've gotten to this level and let's push them a little and it just automatically adjusts it by itself. Let it do that. So the teacher doesn't have to think about that part, but let the teacher be there for when they need those safeguards and they need those extra hands-on kinds of things. Like we're never going to lose that part. I think that's
Uh,
the part we need.
well said. Well said.
As somebody
Uh,
who just went from a digital planner back to paper and pencil, and
yes.
it's kind of changing the game for me these last couple of months since I've tried
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to lose the physical blocks and the tangrams and the cutting and the pasting. It Here I am as a full adult taking a step back away from technology in a way that people who know me in my daily life are surprised to hear. But going back to that a little bit has been an incredibly refreshing experience and reminded me to be a lot more creative and a lot more individual and not just, look, you have to write down your to-do list somewhere, do it in just the most generic way. No, do it in this fun way that's engaging, and you become creative and more productive in all of these different ways. When you think about what you want to do, what you want to learn, and why you want to learn it.
Spoken as true educators. Bravo, bravo. What's coming up this fall and in the new year for AzTEA events, things to look forward to?
Oh, we have a lot on the docket. Our fall conference is coming up in October 25th, and it is the
Educators in Orbit, the Interstellar EdTech Exchange.
Oh, wow. Love that title.
Yes.
And ironically, the idea was we were talking in the planning committee about the myth of the final frontier, and this kind of alludes to what we spoke about earlier, is like AI is not going to have okay, it's developed, we're done, we learn it.
Right.
It's there is no final frontier. We're constantly evolving and moving. So
wonderful.
Yes, and then we're going to be doing a STEM Month conference with the Math, Science, and Technology Teachers Association in February. We also have a cybersecurity conference we're going to do. And then in the spring, we'll have our CI and IT symposium, getting those tech directors and curriculum directors together. That is one of our favorite conferences because we like to break down those barriers. So yeah, we have a lot going on. Plus our ambassador is going to be doing all of those AI sessions coming up. So
it's so important to get them together. A lot to look forward to and continue building that legacy for AzTEA. Thank you all for making time today to catch up and let your readers get to know you better.
thank you.
You.